Sometimes life keeps secrets for decades, and all it takes is a small coincidence for everything to change. If you've ever felt like something was left behind, an answer, a presence, a word never said, then this story is for you. Enrique lived his entire life believing that he was left behind by his father. He grew up with silence as his companion and with questions that no one ever answered. Until one day, while going through his deceased mother's things, he found a letter. A hidden, forgotten letter, but one that carried within it an undelivered forgiveness and a promise never fulfilled. And that's where it all began. What would you do if you discovered, 40 years later, that someone tried to come back, but was prevented by time or by fate? This is not just the story of a lost letter. It's the story of a reunion with the truth, with the past, and with what can still be lived. The house was empty, like Enrique's heart. The smell of mold and old memories still permeated the rooms, even weeks after his mother's wake. Each step he took among the furniture covered in sheets stirred up more than just dust. It brought to light a lifetime of silences, of unanswered questions, of an absence that always hurt more on the days when he needed a hug, and there was no one there. Sitting on the floor of his mother's old room, he rummaged through boxes full of notebooks, yellowed photos, and books with forgotten inscriptions. Everything there seemed to speak to him, but in languages that only time understood. That was when a book fell from a pile and, upon opening by itself, let out a letter, an old one, with a burnt edge and slightly faded ink. Enrique stood there, looking at that envelope as if it were a piece from another time, a trap of fate. He didn't know it yet, but that letter would change everything. For a moment, he hesitated to touch it, as if, upon opening it, the world he knew would crumble. His fingers trembled. The last time he had felt something like this was when his son was born. But that was another story. He took a deep breath and held the envelope, not imagining what he was about to find. Enrique's hand gripped the envelope carefully, as if it were made of fine glass. He ran his fingers over the handwriting on the front, firm, masculine, almost familiar. It was addressed to his mother, dated 1983. His heart raced. That was the year his father had disappeared without a trace, leaving behind a young wife and a baby who had barely learned to walk. He opened the envelope carefully. Inside was a yellowed piece of paper, full of creases and with the sweet smell of old paper. As he read the first words, his eyes filled with a strange emotion, confusion, longing, and a kind of pain he couldn't name. Dear Anna, I know that maybe I've already lost you, but I have to try. For me, for our son. That sentence hit him hard. For the first time, Henry heard, or almost heard, the voice of the father he never knew. The content of the letter was a mixture of regret and hope. The father explained that he had not left for lack of love, but out of cowardice, because of wounds that the world would not let heal. He promised to return, to find his son, to be the father he had never been, and he asked for forgiveness. Forgiveness that never came, because the letter was forgotten in that book for 40 years. Enrique stopped reading. The words still echoed in his mind, and a question took hold of his chest. Why had his mother never shown him this letter? Enrique read the letter 3-4 times, as if he wanted to extract something from it beyond the words. Each line seemed like an open wound, but also a breath of life. He never imagined that his father could have tried to return. For decades, he believed that he had been discarded, forgotten, like an object that was left in a corner and never looked for again. But now everything was changing. The pain of absence gave way to a new confusion. He stood up slowly, still holding the paper in his hands, and walked around the house, as if it could answer the questions growing inside him. Why did my mother keep this? He thought. Did she protect me from disappointment? Or did she try to hide a truth that hurt her too? The silence of the walls seemed to weigh more heavily than ever. Each photograph on the shelf, each old trinket, now carried another layer of meaning. It was then that he found an old notebook in his mother's handwriting. On one of the last pages, a quick note. Letter from Antonio, hidden in the book of Proverbs. I didn't have the courage. Enrique felt his heart tighten. That was it. She knew. She read it. And she decided to keep quiet. Maybe out of fear of rekindling an old pain, maybe out of love. But now it was too late. Too late, and yet, somehow, the beginning of something new. That night, Enrique didn't sleep. He lay down on the couch in the old living room, holding the letter to his chest, as if it could somehow fill the void of a lifetime without a father. Outside, the rain was falling gently, and each drop seemed to mark the time he had lost, the silent birthdays, the advice that never came, the imagined hugs. He tried to imagine his father's face at that time, his voice, his manner. A tormented man perhaps, but not indifferent. The letter showed that. There was regret there. There was love, even if late. And for the first time, Enrique allowed himself to feel not only the pain of absence, but the possible presence of someone who, at least for a moment, wanted to return. In the darkness of dawn, he did something he hadn't done in a long time. He prayed, not for answers but for peace. God, if you know what really happened, help me understand. Help me forgive. It was a simple, broken, but sincere prayer. Because, deep down, Enrique knew without forgiveness, he would never be able to move on. And that letter was the beginning of a new beginning. The next morning, with his eyes still marked by insomnia and his heart heavier than his body, Enrique made a decision. He needed to know more. He needed to find out if his father was still alive. That letter was the only thread, and he would follow it, even if it led nowhere. He took his mother's old album and began to search through everything. Old photos, documents, anything that had a name, an address, a clue. Between the pages he found a folded photograph. A man with a deep gaze, holding a baby in his arms, himself. On the back, a full name and a city. Snow Jose dos Campos. It wasn't much, but it was more than Enrique had ever had in his entire life. With his cell phone in hand and his heart racing, he began to search. Social networks, old records, even obituaries. With each click, a hope, a disappointment, another attempt. After hours of searching, he found something. A name that matched his age, linked to an old mechanic shop. The place still existed, but the owner had retired years ago. A chill ran down his spine. What if it was him? What if he was still alive? The workshop was the only concrete clue he had, and in that moment, Enrique knew he had to go there. Because even if he didn't find his father, maybe he would find a piece of himself. 2 days later, Enrique stood in front of a small workshop. In the countryside of the city, the faded walls and the old signs seemed frozen in time, as if nothing there had been touched in the last 20 years. The sound of tools had been replaced by the silence of a disused space. But there was someone inside, a thin, gray-haired man with a distant look. Sitting behind a dusty counter. Enrique walked in slowly, as if he were stepping into the past. The man looked up with a certain suspicion, but without hostility. "Good afternoon," Enrique said, his voice firm on the outside, but trembling on the inside. "Are you by any chance Antonio?" The silence that followed was thick. The old man hesitated for a moment, then nodded. "I am. How can I help you, young man?" And at that moment, Enrique knew. It was him. There was a pause. A lump in his throat. And then Enrique pulled the folded letter from his pocket. "This letter, did you write it?" Antonio's eyes widened, as if time had gone back and hit him square in the chest. He took the letter with trembling hands, and upon recognizing it, his eyes filled with tears. He remained silent for a long time, until he murmured, "I thought she had never read it." Enrique didn't know what to say. He didn't need to. The reunion that seemed impossible was finally beginning. Old Antonio sat down slowly, as if the weight of that letter and that visit had robbed him of the ground. His teary eyes stared at the table in front of him, but his mind was elsewhere, immersed in memories, regrets, scenes he had tried to bury. "I wrote that letter when I couldn't stand running away anymore," he said, his voice breaking. "But I didn't have the courage to knock on the door. I just left it at the gate, and left." Enrique listened in silence, his heart aching. The man in front of him was not the idealized father he had imagined as a child, but a real man. Flawed, hurt. "Why didn't you come back?" he asked in a whisper. Antonio took a deep breath. "Because I thought you would be better off without me. And maybe maybe you were. But I never stopped thinking about you. Never." There was truth in those words. And also pain, a pain that only those who have experienced it know. They both stood there, facing each other, trying to understand what to do with all that. There was no manual for late beginnings, but there was a principle, the truth, spoken from the heart. Enrique didn't know if he could forgive at that moment, but he felt something breaking inside, or maybe it was something opening. He saw, in that man's eyes, not only his absent father, but a mirror of everything that could have been, and could still be. Somehow. Enrique returned home that night, carrying more than memories, carrying a reunion that, although late, opened a new door in his soul. He knew he wouldn't have all the answers, that the lost time would never come back, that the boy inside him would still miss his father on past birthdays. But there was something bigger now, the possibility of a new chapter, written with truth, with presence, with forgiveness. In the following weeks, he and Antonio met more often. They spoke little at first, as if they were still groping in the dark. But little by little, the silence gave way to stories, shy laughter, memories that, even absent, came to life in the imagination of both. It wasn't a fairy tale. It was real, and precisely for that reason, it is so powerful. When Enrique introduced his father to his grandson, the emotion came in waves. There was no past or future there, only the present that was finally being lived. One night, as he looked up at the sky in the backyard, Enrique whispered a prayer. "Thank you, God, for not giving up on us, even when we give up." Life, he learned, is made up of cycles, and not all of them end in the time we expect. But when we open our hearts, even the oldest wounds can blossom into something new. Sometimes all we need is to finally read the letter that life left for us, even if it is 40 years late. Some stories do not have perfect endings, but they have new beginnings that are worth every second. Enrique did not have his father present during his childhood, but he had the chance to get to know him as a man, to hear his pain, and most importantly, to forgive him. And with that, something profound happened. he also freed himself. Sometimes, what hurts the most is not the absence, but what we stop feeling for fear of suffering again. But when we choose to open our hearts, even late, even when we are afraid, life surprises us with healing encounters, with forgiveness, with peace, and you. Have you ever wondered what you would do if you discovered a truth that has been hidden for decades? Is there someone waiting for a word from you, for forgiveness, for a new chance? If this story touched your heart, share it with someone who needs to hear it today. Subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications so you don't miss any of the stories that touch the soul. Because here, each story is a seed and can blossom where you least expect.